Sky News at 9. You're watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. And in the next half hour, we'll see what's making tomorrow's headlines with the Middle East analyst Nabila Ramdani and the Conservative MP and author of the book Master of Nothing, Nadhim Zahawi. Nice to see you both. So let's take a look at tomorrow's. And joining me is the Conservative MP and author of the book Masters of Nothing, Nadhim Zahawi, and Middle East analyst Nabila Ramdani. Good to see you both. And you want to start with The Independent, indeed that story that we were talking about just there, the strikes. The front of The Independent, Ed Balls, I have huge sympathy for the strikers.
I think Ed's got to be careful because if you look at the polling evidence, 52% of the nation are actually against the strikes. 58% want to change to the way ballots take place, i.e. they want a threshold for turnout because three of the unions, GMB, Unison and Unite, had about a 1/3 turnout. So, is that legitimate or not? And the reason I say he's got to be careful is because there'll be some of his constituents who work in the private sector. I've had emails tonight saying to me, look, I work in the private sector, I've got nowhere near as generous a deal. And on Wednesday, what will happen is parents with children will be so annoyed at this, they'll begin to focus on the actual details of the deal. And when they see the details, they'll even be more upset with the unions. And I think be more upset with Ed Balls and Ed Miliband for not coming out and playing the good guys and saying, look, let's try and convince the unions not to go out on strike because they're still negotiating. I mean, one of these sort of crazy anomalies is that whilst negotiating, they balloted for strike. I mean, how does that work?
You say that the parents will be furious with teachers on Wednesday, and I don't think that's fair to say, because I know a lot of people who have children in school, and they have sympathy for their children's teachers. They think their children's teachers do a good job, and they deserve a good salary, and they deserve a decent pension.
I don't disagree with you. Public sector workers deserve a very decent pension. In fact, the reason it's more generous than the private sector is because people who dedicate their life to public service do so whilst knowing full well that they will sacrifice many of the advantages of maybe working in the private sector. The deal on offer, if you think about an average teacher, you talked about teachers, an average teacher at retirement earning £37,000 a year will get £25,000 pension now versus getting £19,000 under the old system. So actually it's more generous. Anyone earning less than £15,000, the lowest paid public workers in schools and in other parts of the public sector will not see any change. Anyone within 10 years of retirement will not actually be affected. This is a very generous offer. I think they need to think long and hard before they go out on strike on Wednesday. All the polling evidence is showing that the public opinion, the nation, is beginning to harden in their view that this is wrong at a time when Europe is going through, last Wednesday, Portugal stopped completely. What does that do for confidence, this intangible thing that we all worry about business confidence? We've got the Chancellor delivering his autumn statement on Tuesday, and we're all talking about a growth plan and confidence. What does this do for confidence in our economy?
Well, I think the unions will say that you and the government is misrepresenting the generosity of the proposals, and that's the front page of The Observer, which I know we're going to look at in a second. But first, Nabila, what's your take on this? I mean, what do you think the take would be from Europe on what's happening here in Britain? Do you think in France, for example, there'd be sympathy for the strikers?
Yes, very much so, and especially in France, we're talking about a country which has a tradition of taking to the streets when you have, even though the proportion of people who are actually a part of a union is very small in France, strikes in France are famous for being quite disruptive and sometimes bringing the country to a standstill to make a political point, essentially. And I think it's fair and it's quite right for the Shadow Chancellor to support workers during times of great austerity. And I think we shouldn't lose sight that he's a member of the Labour Party who is traditionally, affiliated.
89% of their funding comes from the unions, hence why they don't come out and actually say to the unions, look, you're doing something completely wrong here.
But I think it's more than that, because there has been a shift in the Labour Party, especially under Tony Blair, where there were less sympathy for strikers, and it's a redefinition almost of what the Labour Party is all about.
They've moved further to the left and are now in under the control of the unions, which is why Ed Miliband and Ed Balls and in fact Rachel Reeves have not been able to come out and say, look, this is wrong, let's just finish the negotiations first before you ballot. You can't be negotiating at the same time as going out on strike.
Let's take a look at The Observer, because as I was just saying there, unions are saying that ministers and the Conservatives like yourself, Nadeem, aren't telling the truth on pensions. Let's zoom into that. Brendan Barber, the TUC General Secretary, says that ministers have been selling the proposals on a false prospectus but had blown their cover at the 11th hour through the latest version of the calculator, which appeared online yesterday. And what they've basically done is they've gone through what is being offered, and they say that this other calculator, which is being shown, shows that the government has deliberately misrepresented the generosity of the proposals. I suppose this is part of the problem, is it, Nabila, that unfortunately it's he said, she said, and unless you yourself really understand what one particular person knows or earns or what their pension is going to be, it's very hard for general people to actually work out which is the right set of figures.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, it's part and parcel of political jargon, in fact, when it's very hard for, the general public to get into these hugely complicated questions about the state of the economy. But what the general public is aware of is that they're feeling the repercussions of, what is a global problem, essentially, and especially a European problem at the moment. So they feel it directly in their day-to-day life about how, they cannot afford any longer to put food on the table or to warm the house. And that's what really is meaningful for the general public, rather than complicated jargon about
What do you
figures.
think the reaction is going to be on Wednesday? Because we've had a lot of emails here into the Sky News inbox, a lot of them angry about the strikes that are going ahead, but a great deal of them sympathetic.
I think you'll find, you remember I used to run YouGov for 11 years, so I think, and there's a line in the Observer piece saying that the unions are enrolled in a desperate battle to swing public opinion behind their case. I think you'll find public opinion will harden against the strike and against what the unions are actually doing and the union bosses. Of course, people will still see their teacher and their head teacher as being someone that they respect and completely understand that they need to get a decent pension. But I think the danger here is the public will begin to focus on the details and actually compare and contrast between the private sector pension that they may be getting versus what the government is offering to the public sector. It is far more generous. It really is. And I think the danger for the unions is public opinion will begin to harden because they'll begin to focus on the detail.
Do you think that this is the start of a winter of discontent? Do you think we're going to see more strikes over the next few months?
Well, I hope not. I think that we got ourselves into a pretty good position by dealing with the deficit very early on in this government. And you can see last week our borrowing rate was lower than Germany's. We used to boast a bit about it being equal to that of Germany, yet our deficit was the size of Portugal's. Yes, we're able to borrow at the same rates as Germany. Last week we actually borrowed at lower rates than Germany. So I think by dealing with the problem, the markets were rewarding us. And by dealing with the pension problem, I think that, the markets again will reward us if we get this right. What I'd like to see is a strike called off, that actually the unions over this weekend, you've still got Monday and Tuesday.
That's not likely to happen, is it?
Well, you know what? Why not? Why can't they come to the table? If Ed Miliband and Ed Balls would come out this weekend, tomorrow's Sunday, Monday they've got a chance in Parliament, Tuesday they've got a chance in Parliament, to come out and urge the unions not to do this, I think you'll find the unions may just give in and swing towards what is a very, very generous deal.
We shall see, and I'm sure they would dispute what you say is generous, but we shall see in the next few days. Lots more to come in the second part. Do stay with us after this short break.